So look, thank you all for joining this morning. As I say, bit of a blast from the past doing this back online, but it felt like the right thing to do with the strikes this week. But as you can see, we've kept it to a really intimate group so we can still have that very open conversation. But really just to frame up why this conversation. So a big part of what we've been looking at lately at the Founding Network is really around how can we help founders get dramatically more output without a huge increase in their resource. And that is because just time and time again, what we're going to see probably over the next few years is it's not necessarily the ones that raise the biggest rounds or hire the fastest that are really going to build the biggest companies. It'll be the ones that build real leverage into their businesses. So that's exactly why this session matters. And of course, I think we're all becoming accustomed, I'd say, to all the AI tools that we're seeing out there. Even if we're not using them, we're sort of aware of them and know of the ones we probably should be using. But we're also seeing a real shift from just those tools, AI tools, into actually AI teammates. So systems that can really handle everything from marketing, research, sales, whatever function it may be, so we can all focus on what really matters within our own businesses. And that's really where Launch Lemonade come in. I think a fair few of you on the call were actually, along with ourselves, lucky enough to hear Shen, one of the co-founders at Launch Lemonade, speak at Found London, our conference last year. And within that sort of 20-minute overview, I think it was a real eye-opener. And we had so much positive feedback from that, and people really just wanted more of it and to get more into the details. So we thought by actually bringing together a smaller group and doing it over an hour instead of just 20 minutes was the perfect opportunity to dive into what's really out there and what's really possible. So today we're lucky enough to be joined by Shen's co-founder Joe, who's going to be walking us through it all. Joe, you are now on screen if you want to give a little wave. So Joe's, as I say, co-founder of Launch Lemonade, but can really walk us through not just their platform, but also what we should be looking at as founders. So just run of the day, Joe's going to speak for sort of 30 to 40 minutes about what they're seeing, what really works, what doesn't. And then that'll leave us a bit of time for a Q&A towards the end as well. So what we'll do is feel free to, throughout the session, if you just type your questions into the chat within Zoom, and then towards the end, what we can do is pull you up and ask you to ask your question and sort of handpick some of those questions. So look, really looking forward to getting into this. I think at the Founding Network, we need this session as much as anyone, Joe. So I'll hand over to you.
Cool. Thanks, James. And yeah, thanks, everyone. Very nice to see and meet you. So yeah, my name's Joe. I'll do a quick background from me. So studied engineering at university and then went into like a 9-10 year career in the Royal Air Force, where I was an engineer by trade, so weapons and aerosystems. Didn't really touch coding in the Air Force too much until I was deployed in Afghanistan in like 2014, and I had to do some planning task. Hadn't touched coding at that point since I was at university, so that's, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before then. I had to do a planning task to sort of help with the withdrawal of Camp Bastion and the close down of Camp Bastion at the time. And I realized the task was enormous. Basically, I was responsible for all ammunition for all UK troops in all of Afghanistan. And so I had to come up with a plan to how to, so reduce that and like scale it down in a safe way. And I realized I couldn't do it like with Excel because I literally I was in a tent with a dusty laptop. And so I relearned how to code in that tent over the space of about 3 or 4 days. And then wrote a program to do, the thing I was trying to do. So I realized from that, when I was thinking about like back of my story, I was thinking that it's kind of similar-ish to the sort of theme of today. I fag packet, sort of back of a fag packet, worked out that it would have taken me to by hand do the maths to calculate this plan that I had for the drawdown of Camp Bastion. It would have taken me 2 weeks of manual maths. But by 2 weeks, I was doing, I don't know, like 14-hour, 16-hour days, 7 days a week in Afghanistan. So that would have been like 2 full weeks of just maths, hoping I wasn't making a mistake. Or I could just write a program to do it. And I figured, even though I was pretty rusty with coding at the time, I was like, that's going to be a better bet. So I did that, and it worked. And that was anyway. That was my eye-opening moment where I sort of realized that, oh, maybe I do like software engineering, and maybe this sort of stuff is interesting to me. So yeah, that took me after 9 years in the Air Force. I went across, joined JP Morgan, worked in their FX space for a couple of years in the tech team. And after the last 4 years of my time at JP Morgan, I was working in their blockchain and digital asset front office team. So I was a product manager there, but I did like product sales, onboarding. I was the first full-time hire for the digital asset wing of the JP Morgan blockchain team. So yeah, sort of did a bit of everything to start with. It was a really, really interesting role. Grew that platform from a standing start up to, I think by the end we'd done 1.5 trillion. By the time I left, we did 1.5 trillion dollars in value passed. So that was the first time that I got to say the word trillion in a way that wasn't sort of sarcastic or just exaggerating something. So that was kind of cool. Anyway, really enjoyed that time. And then last year, Shen reached out and I moved across to LaunchLemonade because although very passionate and very interested in the technology behind the blockchain, I genuinely find it very interesting. And yeah, it's still a pet interest of mine. It was just so obvious from once I first touched ChatGPT, whenever the hype cycle around it sort of first started, that I realized that this was going to be pretty huge and I wanted to be part of it. So yeah, I've been with LaunchLemonade informally for actually since the start. So I knew Shen before she started it. So I was one of the first users of the platform. Excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold. I feel like I've been recovering from the cold for about 2 weeks. Yeah, so I was one of the first users of LaunchLemonade. Started, I was involved with it from more formally as of like 6 months ago, but full time from January. So yeah, I'll take you through a deck today, which I'll start sharing soon, and go through sort of the way I think is a helpful way to frame the conversation around like scaling, headcount, where does AI fit in, where doesn't it fit in, how to think about it, all that sort of stuff. So I'll start sharing my screen now. And I'm happy to take questions whenever. I think James will help with sort of picking them out. So yeah, don't feel like you're interrupting a flow. There isn't one. Cool. Okay. Can you guys? Is my screen visible to people? Can you see the?
Yeah, we've got it.
Great. Okay. Okay. So we'll move on from the intro. So basically, why this talk? Why now? We're definitely seeing. I mean, we're not at Series A. We raised pre-seed just before Christmas, but yeah, we're definitely seeing amongst colleagues, peers, large organizations, small organizations that it's pretty clear that white collar work and AI go together very, very nicely. We're also even seeing sort of quite a lot of buzz from the robotics space, especially out of Far East Asia, sort of China and Japan. Excuse me, seem to be leading the way in terms of the robotics sort of world and what robots powered by AI can do. But essentially, I guess when it comes down to it, it's about runway really, and the most expensive thing that most people will pay for is the headcount, and the most important number that the board watches and as founders sort of we watch is one of them at least is our burn rate. And so trying to juggle headcount and burn rate whilst maintaining like a high quality product is a tricky balance and always feels like quite a difficult thing to do. So yeah, I guess some of the stats here are sort of semi-anecdotal, but 24 to 36 months is typical runway of what a Series A founder would have to get to your Series B metrics, and then yeah, typically 60 to 70% of that of your runway would go to headcount. So it seems to be like a pretty ripe target to try to be smart about, at least. Okay, so yeah, I think James sort of touched on this, and I think this is the sort of what we consider the I don't know if it's the old growth equation, but at least a previous growth equation would be it was like relatively simple. You raise some money, you hire lots of really talented people who are interested in the mission, and then you grow the business. And it's almost not linear. I think linear is probably the wrong term, but maybe it scales like quadratically or something like that. But basically, there's a relatively clear sort of line to number of headcount versus what you think you can grow to. And then as there is more work that comes in, you can maybe hire more people. And that continues until your company is a relatively large. But actually, there are companies now there are solo founders and there are solopreneurs and there are very, very, very light, lean teams, especially within the software space, who are currently sort of able to deliver what you would expect like a 50, 30, or maybe 60 to 100 person team would deliver. So yeah, but as you grow, I mean, if in the sort of typical old space, it would be, you would hire account executives, sales managers, sales reps. You would expect them probably to spend 6 months ramping up before, maybe 6 months is a bit unambitious, maybe, but 2, 3, 4 months maybe is realistic to sort of expect them to ramp up before you start to see them closing their first deals. Marketing can be, if done externally, or if done anyway, can be relatively quite expensive, and the feedback loop for getting your marketing right is quite a slow and arduous thing to do. It's quite difficult to sort of help another, like if you're getting marketing from an agency, it's quite hard and slow to get sort of the feedback from them as to what the tone of voice for your entire business is, what the character of your business is, how you want to present it. Sometimes you don't even fully know the exact picture yourself, but you definitely know what you don't like when they present something back to you. So trying to sort of close that loop as to what how quickly you can sort of work out what you want to do, it would be really good as well. And then on the operations side, you get like ops managers, customer support reps, all these other sort of seats tend to grow with the number of clients that you're serving. So yeah, I guess that's the old say. So yeah, I guess previously more work meant more headcount, and today more work tends to mean can mean more agents. So one of the questions that we sort of ask ourselves at LaunchLemonade is, when we're thinking about hiring someone, or we think we're sort of flattened with all the work we've got, is it that our workflow and the way we're doing things is inefficient? Like, can we just reorganize things in a way that could be done by agents? Or like, really, do we actually need to hire someone for this role that we're sort of dreaming of, or the work that we're sort of trying to offload, or we're trying to get done more quickly? So there is it doesn't like that not being a word. It probably isn't a word. Okay, but there is a kind of 2x2 matrix that I sort of think is, I think it's pretty relevant. I think when I was looking around, I think I sort of stole this from McKinsey, but they were looking at this from a ROI perspective. Well, I think the same thing can be reframed from a should I hire or should I use an agent perspective. So the 2x2 grid is like, the top row is, can AI do this thing? And then the bottom row is like, is it commodity work or is it like your differentiator? And I think the reason I've put it into this 2x2 is that, say, for example, you are a marketing agency. Well, your differentiator is your ability to provide amazing marketing to people, and your ability to like understand their business and, do a really tailored bespoke job. So that's your differentiator. You're probably not going to just AIify all of that work and all of the decision making around that, because it's your like differentiator. Or if you do that, you will probably build your own like very highly bespoke system that will do exactly your particular job. But actually that would probably be like somewhat of an in-house build that you control the tech stack of. Whereas perhaps the commodity work is, I mean, a lot of people have commodity work around, replying to emails, or prioritizing your calendar, or maybe doing some research, or synthesizing data, or analyzing. Well, again, one person's commodity work is another person's differentiator, but perhaps like comparing a contract that's come in, or an offer that's come in, against the sort of acceptable sort of standards that your company would work with, or the acceptable terms that you would agree to, and trying to carry out like a diff between those, or a sense check between those two different documents. Doing that is often sort of commodity work, and AI can do it. So, that's the sort of area where you could just say, hey, look, an agent could probably do that today. It's not a differentiator for my business, and and it's commodity work. So an AI, an AI agent or a chatbot or something could do that for me. Whereas there are certain things that you just need a person for. And then, I guess we're working out here whether or not you consider it to be commodity work or a differentiator, and whether or not you should hire now, outsource, or otherwise. So hopefully this is kind of somewhat of a helpful sort of heuristic to how to think about that. But maybe taking a step back, and I don't know the full level of technical ability or depth for the group. So some people may find this a bit slow, but some people may already be asking, sort of wondering the question, like, how would you even define this thing? What is AI and what are agents? So I guess the best way to describe an agent is that it is an AI powered, and AI in this sense means a large language model powered piece of software that will take a goal on board. Like, so you can give it a goal or a target, and it will decide on its own in a non-deterministic way how to execute that goal and execute that goal. So it picks how to do something, whether it needs like data or it needs tools or it needs whatever it may be. So it decides how to do it, analyzes a goal, it can think about it, it analyzes how to do it, and it does the thing. And then on the right hand side, maybe you're sort of wondering then, well, why is that definition even helpful? Why is that important? If you typically think about a person who just goes to ChatGPT, and most people do this, I still do this for certain tasks, right? I'll go to Claude or ChatGPT or something, and I'll use it a little bit like Google, and I'll type in a question and get an answer for how to approach a certain problem. But I wouldn't describe that. I personally wouldn't describe that as an agent. That's not like an agentic flow. That is you putting a request into a chatbot. It can access the internet probably, and it will answer your question. And so that's, I guess, relatively 2D in terms of its abilities. It's still amazing. It's still very, very useful, and it will still help a business scale by just I guess reducing friction and speeding up work. But it's I wouldn't necessarily describe it as like a teammate or an agent. The sort of next level is that a lot of people are familiar with this too, especially in large companies, or if you've come from a large company, is Microsoft Copilot. Or I guess a Copilot generally. A Copilot can be reviewing a document with you and make suggestions. But ultimately you're going to still be responsible for the output, and you'll do a lot of the changing and editing, etc., on that document. But you'll still do it. So it's sort of like, it's like I guess Copilot is the sort of helpful sort of way to describe that. And then finally, like, the agentic level or an agent, what I said at the start of this slide, right? So it's something that is able to take the intent of what you're trying to achieve and then continuously or a single time, depends on the task, but is able to complete that task for you. So whether it's like triaging emails, maybe like a good example of this is a coding agent. So the most I think absolutely the best fit for AI or AI agents so far to date, and I don't think this is I think this is unequivocally true, is coding. So like coding is the number one use case for AI agents or AI at the moment. It's the most productive, and the reason is it's I guess there's many reasons why. I can go into why later. But an AI agent, for example, would be able to examine. So you could you could have an issue like a Jira ticket. Hopefully you guys are all familiar with Jira, but you can have a Jira or Trello ticket. You can point your agent at that ticket, and it will, like, with no further context, look at your code base, analyze what's wrong, make the changes, suggest what to change. And if you permit it to, and I wouldn't recommend you do permit it to, but if you do permit it to, it can actually make those changes to your production system as well. So you could just provide it a ticket, say, hey, there's a problem here, and it will go away and, to the best of its ability, fix that problem and make changes to your code base. Again, I'm not suggesting that people rely quite so heavily on AI coding agents just yet, unless you're very comfortable to do so. But yeah, that would be an example of an agent. So instead of it being like a chatbot or a Copilot, it's, you're just giving it the problem, and it works out what the problem is. Okay, so how did my own role change? Okay, well, so yeah, maybe this is a really good. This is quite a helpful sort of example. So this is something I built for myself, and it works on my local machine. I call it the chief of staff. This isn't a sales pitch because it's not available for sale, but it is a tool that I use by cobbling together other tools together. I think we'll offer this or something like it in the future because it is a bit of a game changer for my day to day. But essentially, like, in the before state, basically, if I'm on a call, even though there's an AI note taker, I'm probably writing down the things that I think are actually the most important things to me, because I'm going to get a list from the note taker, maybe via email or something, and maybe I'll ignore it. Or if if I'm the person who needs to follow up the actions, then fine, I'll use that thing. But I don't necessarily I don't necessarily stop taking notes because I have an AI note taker. I organize my notes into like post-it notes. I'll then, pick off the tasks sort of one by one or by whatever looks to be the most important task. And then I'll, use my Sharpie pen with thick underlining to highlight things that are very important to me. It's quite, I've worked like that for probably the first 15 years of my career. However, what I've got now set up on this machine, I have a single agent that I call my chief of staff, and it joins every call. So it's not on this call, but it joins every other call that I'm on, and it acts like a granola thing. So granola will take the transcription of the meeting, as most of you know, but it actually will extract out all of the actions from that, and then it puts those actions into a to-do dashboard for me. And then from that dashboard, I can then drag and drop. I can either drag and drop those items into my calendar, and it will like populate my calendar, or I can just say, hey, look, this is important. I need to find me some time to do this particular action. And it will take that to-do task with the context that it has, and then like block out my calendar with like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, etc. So it very much acts like a virtual assistant or a PA. But it's an LLM, and it's an LLM with a calendar and a to-do list. It listens to my calls. It takes actions for me in that call. And at one point, I built it out to read my emails as well. So if an email came in with an action, it would also be able to tell me of that. So it gives me like a daily summary of like, hey, here's everything. Here's your meetings for the day. Here's everything you need to do this week. And so you can sort of a lot of the mental load of my day-to-day keeping track of the tasks that I do, a lot of that has sort of evaporated for me. And the nice thing about that is I feel like most of my mental capacity, because I only have a certain amount of brain cells to spend on every day, most of my mental capacity is actually saved to doing the things that are differentiators for my business, not like organizing myself. And I'm a relatively organized person. I guess like the Air Force sort of trains that in you, but still, I genuinely find this to be very, 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 very helpful and a great system. So yeah, that's like definitely one part of it. And then the second part of it is on the speed part. So I mentioned earlier, so I'm a CTO. I spend most of my time at the moment. I spend most of my time in the code base. This bottom right image here, this is like my Claude Code usage, which is super, super high. I don't think I'm on a record table anywhere, but I'm pleased with the sort of number of messages and the amount of usage I'm getting out of it. But essentially, with Claude Code, another sort of example of how I can ship faster is that overnight we get sort of error logs, and there's daily error logs will come in for the application, things that have gone wrong, but bugs tend to self-report. They don't always, but we're building like really good observability on the platform to help us sort of spot errors. And then what I tend to do in the morning is I'll have a look at them. I'll decide if I'm like familiar with some of the bugs and they're just not really that important, I'll get to them another time. That's fine. But if they're ones that I'm a little surprised by, or I think are unusual, or I think are a bit, might be masking a deeper problem. What I actually use at the moment is I don't even create a Trello ticket or a Jira ticket for anymore. I literally because I use Claude Code for coding. There's a companion app on the mobile, and it has a feature called Dispatch. So I'm actually able to like grab the ID of the error, because every error on our system creates this ID. I just grab the error ID and I provide it to Dispatch in the morning, or literally on my dog walk. And I say, hey, look, take a look at these few problems in our code base, and Dispatch will use my machine that's at home. So the mobile is just the interface. It'll use my machine at home, to sort of inspect the logs, look at the error, triage it, propose, potential problems, and then come back to me with like a full report, so that when I sit down, like for the 30 minutes I have before the stand-up, I'm able to like look at its report, look at its feedback, and say, okay, I think what it's saying makes sense here, and it's not just guessing at what the problem is. It's actually found a definitive like sort of smoking gun for this particular problem. And if I like it, then I'll get it to raise a PR and help understand that. But basically, that, I mean, if you're not technical, that simple task of looking at an error, working out what it might be, and then figuring out how to fix it, even if Claude Code is only successful 50% of the time, I think it's still saving me 3 to 5 times the output that I personally have. I tried to work out, like, it's very difficult to like put a number on how much time saved, but if you look at like number of lines of code, it's also pretty poor metric, to be honest. But I'd certainly think that like my personal output is enormously increased by the fact that I'm able to run things asynchronously, and I have an agent that can do things in the background while I'm, got dog walking duties to do. So that to me makes a massive difference, and it helps us just be fast. I'm not sure what that is. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So I guess then the question may be, when does what are the patterns, or what are the things that might be worth building for yourselves? I've already sort of espoused the benefits of coding agents. I think they're a bit of a no-brainer. But outside of that, there are a number of patterns that I would say it's worth picking that are sort of closest to your cost line. And there's a page later on that will talk about how do you think about what is the right problem to first approach. But yeah, a few examples here are like qualifying inbounds, for example, can be quite a laborious and quite a slow process, and can be relatively hit and miss. So you can create an agent that will, or even a chatbot that has knowledge of your business and knowledge of your systems and knowledge of what a good or high quality inbound looks like for you, is able to search the internet and do a lot of the research up front. And it's up to you for each of these, but it's up to you like how far you take that. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want it to just do the research and present you with some hard facts, or you actually want it to go further than that and say, give you just a simple yes or no, whether or not this is a qualified inbound and you should follow up with. And then secondly, a content creator. So we talked about marketing earlier. I guess the part with content creation is that it needs to, any agent or any human being even that's creating content, helping you create content, needs to understand your ideas, your voice, what your strategy is, where you want the business to go. And you can provide that context to a bespoke or an individual agent that will, then be able to sort of help you generate and crank out content ideas, or the content material itself, to do this. You can go one step further as well, away from just the ideas, and actually, I mean, a lot of people will do this already. They'll use AI to help them create maybe the storyboard, or even create the images themselves. And then there are platforms like Seedance and others that will even do the video, like they'll do like video content creation too, which is pretty amazing. Support triage, I guess, is a pretty obvious one. I think most people will be familiar with that. But then the two other areas that I think it may be particularly pertinent is onboarding of new hires. So if you're able to sort of create a pack of data that is for your onboarding or for your new employees, it's actually pretty efficient. We did this at my old place. We created a bot for this, which would just like handhold someone through the onboarding process. They still do all the meet and greets. They can still do all of the things, but if they have like a follow-up question or any question they think might be a stupid question, they can like go to this point to sort of like work out, what is the right team that's responsible for X, Y, and Z, or is there a policy written for whatever this might be? That's like quite a helpful thing to do to help people get up to speed at least in a uniform manner. So it's not, maybe one person's onboarding experience is really good, the next person turns up and everyone's really busy and they don't get a very good onboarding experience. So you can sort of help. Like homogenize sounds like a bad or a negative word, but I suppose in the sense of onboarding quality, maybe you do want some consistency to how you onboard people. So you can do that. And then finally, kind of similar to the onboarding, operations. So SOPs, escalation points, etc. So I use an operations agent, which will, if something breaks, I can provide it with the like identifier of that particular thing that breaks. And in a non-firefighting mode, when there's a fire on, I've sat down and I've laid out, okay, so here's a decision tree for most scenarios, maybe not all, but you can think of like a decision tree for most scenarios, and it will like guide me through that decision tree in a way that I've managed to. So I've planned it out when my head's clear, and I'm implementing it when everything's on fire. And an agent's actually quite good at doing that, because it's not gonna have the fear or panic or emotional sort of input of any firefighting. So it's quite good at handling that, and you can provide it the scripts too to do some of that stuff if it's a technical change. So then I guess we've talked about what's possible and where to do it, and I mentioned Claude Code and I've mentioned Claude generally, but then I guess and we've also talked about that 2x2 matrix. Excuse me. Of should a human do it, or should you just get an off-the-shelf AI to do it, or should you build your own bespoke AI to do that thing? And so, yeah, there's a few decisions, or there's many ways to sort of cut the skin the cat. But yeah, the decision to either build, buy, or orchestrate can be sort of maybe split off into these three. So, like, you can build your own agent stack from scratch, and I think if that is a part of your core business and deep area of expertise, then I think it is worth doing, because you'll know exactly how to do it correctly, and you'll be able to control the customer experience if it's a customer facing thing. And you'll have that. There's a lot to do, and you're very opinionated about how that service should be provided or that task should be done. Then I do think building, maybe not even from scratch, but building does make sense. The second one is like buying. So off the, maybe going to a, you could think about Granola or even Claude Code or anything really, or even just ChatGPT. You can just buy some sort of platform off the shelf. The only risk around that, I mean, it's fast to deploy and it will give you good enough results if you're patient enough to sort of help tweak it. But the downside of that is there is a bit of a vendor risk. Like if your entire stack is dependent on a single vendor, and Claude have had outages. Lots of these sort of firms have had outages, so it is worth thinking whether or not there is a like single dependency there, and whether or not you're able to sort of survive if said LLM goes offline for a few hours. So there's that side of things. And then I guess this is sort of what you think you might want to do in the future, which is like orchestrate. So you can have multiple different agents that run on multiple different LLMs, and you can then the idea is that you should be able to just provide your context to, it doesn't matter which model, and then orchestrate sort of tasks between those different models. So it's I guess like horses for courses in that sense. I suppose then one of the questions that we've been asked a lot with building out agents is how do you provide governance around it? How do you provide governance and security and safety around it? So I think the helpful way to think about it is to literally think of every agent as an employee, and think of your controls around an agent as you might an employee or piece of software, because in some ways they do really they act like an individual, but they are treated like software. So I think from the way to think about it perspective, it is helpful to provide like each of your agents with an identity or a purpose or a role. I think it is very helpful to, from as early as you can, try to make sure that the AI you're using and doing has an audit trail, so that if something were to go wrong, you can actually identify what part of the agent stack or LLM stack when the whatever error was introduced, but you can identify that. It kind of links with like data, so making sure that whatever client data you have, if you are using an LLM with it, you're doing so in a way that your clients would be okay with. So for example, most of the time, essentially I try in all cases not to put any client data whatsoever through an LLM that would train on model data. So that's like I would say that's the bare minimum thing to do. And then, depending on your business type, you can go further. You can maybe do an in-house language model that doesn't go out to a server farm out in California, or variations of. You can like use different techniques to like hide the data that you're providing to the LLM too. And then I suppose data and audit, maybe there's two similar points here, but the one risk that we're seeing with some teams is that it's like a risk and it's a bit of a challenge and it's an opportunity, but essentially that different people will use different LLMs for different things. So they'll use Gemini for one thing, they'll use ChatGPT for another type of task, they'll use Claude for another type of task. So that means that one individual probably has 3 subscriptions maybe, But also, if it's not a company approved LLM, what we're finding a lot of people do, and I think this will resonate with folk, is that they'll just use the laptop on the side. They'll use their own personal laptop to like do the quick thing that they know Claude can do because my company doesn't allow me to use Claude. And then they'll sort of mentally import that information over to the work machine and carry on going. So it depends on your business, depends on the risks associated with your business. But yeah, that can be quite an unattractive quite an unattractive thing to happen. So that's sort of shadow AI use is what we're describing it as. Model choice mentioned before. What if your model's down, or what if you want access to more models? That's definitely something to think about. And the abilities and capabilities of each of these does change quite quickly, and the costs as well. That's another side. And then as part of governance, it's really worth thinking about where the human in the loop element comes in. An example of this is on LaunchLemonade, one of our clients serves his students. Sorry, let me take a step back. One of our clients he's actually a professor of social work from the University of Texas, and he teaches his students about social work and provides them the ability to have an AI chatbot so that they can help train that chatbot with their students. Sounds kind of like I guess it's like the frontiers of what social work and sociology and stuff is sort of doing and doing safely. But the key thing is the human in the loop element is that he's trained it in such a way that it will flag to the owner of the chatbot if there are any like red flags of the end user's comments and statements. So if there's anything that the end user is saying that would be a red flag to a social worker, he's sort of made it. He's put all the guards and all the safety rails in place, but he's also made it flag so that they're able to identify any red flags. So that there's that human element in the loop, so that you can catch the things that you would want to catch for whatever given business you have. And then kill switch. I guess this is the Terminator sort of fear that the robots take over and do too much. Yes, actually, kill switch is a little bit more tricky than most would think, but especially in the coding agent space. But super important to be able to know at least if in the case of an event where you think you've been compromised, you're able to switch off your system, switch off your tokens, reduce your cost, etc. So this slide says it's a 90-day playbook. I think 90 days is way too long to do this. I honestly think this is like a 3-week, maybe. Playbook, but essentially what we advise people do is spend as much time as they can looking at the like top 10 recurring tasks that they don't think provides value but they must do, and then pick a number of those, and then decide which ones to sort of pick, and then try to agentify those things, and then for each of those given tasks, and I wouldn't try to build one agent that does everything. I think it's much better. Agents or chatbots even work better if they're given as a relatively tight scope. So I would then spend a week just with someone who's someone on your team that's like going to be enthusiastic about this, run through and run it alongside them. So every time they do that job, get the AI to do the job and check whether or not, like, what is the output, and provide feedback to the AI as it goes. I think the feedback loop is really, really understated here. A lot of people will use a chatbot or use an agent and decide it's rubbish without really giving it a chance to learn from the errors that it's previously made. And that can take, I do think this can take a week or a good number of hours of usage at least to get a system that's like working as you want it to. And then I guess it's the, it's successful if you're able to just stop doing that thing yourself. So you can retire either the process that was previously running that task, but also then work out like what the ROI is of that particular thing. So I think this is like the same information, but I think distilled in, like, for me, a more clear way. So a mistake that's made is like all on the left-hand side. So the first mistake is like starting with a really, really complex workflow. I would generally advise against that. I would start as simple as possible, as simple and mundane as possible. The second mistake people tend to make is like nobody owns that particular agent. It's just a shared pool, and there's no metrics and there's no ROI. There's no like deadline to how that thing's doing it. The third mistake I do think can be locking into one model. The reason is, and I'm not saying you couldn't, if you wanted to, use Gemini for everything. what I would say is you shouldn't use Gemini Pro Plus, or in the Claude world, I would say it is generally not wise to use Opus 4.7 for every single task you do. It's just very expensive and will actually be relatively slow. So being smart about what the task is and whether or not it needs the best frontier model, or actually you're much better off doing a small, cheaper model. And I can give you an example of that because I realize I haven't touched on it. When I'm building out my chief of staff tool, one of the things that AI is good at, one of the techniques it does under the hood, is called tool calling. So that's the ability for the LLM to ingest a piece of text from me saying, for example, block out tomorrow 3 p.m. till 4 for me to work on a deck, for example. If I was to choose Opus or a really expensive tool to do that, there's two things that could cause a problem. Firstly, it goes into a chain of thought process. The more complex it is, the more likely it's going to go into a chain of thought process, at least today. And the second thing is it's quite expensive because of the token cost is quite high, input and output. What you could do instead is I could actually just give that exact same prompt to Haiku, so a really small light model, and it's going to be cheaper to run, firstly. But secondly, Haiku, Gemini Flash, GPT-4o Mini, and a few others are really good at tool calling. So they're really good at understanding that the user has said a thing that means I, as the LLM, need to reply with a certain structure of words, which will then invoke a tool to be called, like another piece of software, basically. Smaller models tend to be a bit better at that. They're definitely faster at doing it. They're definitely cheaper at doing it, and they tend to be more consistent too. So that's this point here is just, don't just rely on a single model type. If you have a favorite vendor, that's also fine, but switching between model types is good for different tasks. I would generally avoid as much as possible exposing your client data to an LLM if you haven't first done the bare minimum governance steps. The first bare minimum governance step would be ensuring that the provider isn't training on your data. So there are settings within Claude Code, there are settings within ChatGPT on the software side of things where you can restrict what it does. Actually, the easier way to prevent it is via API, because the API routes generally, almost for most providers, don't train on client data. And then the other bit is some people do try to run before they walk, and then they sort of they run into problems. So they get rid of the human process that was doing a thing, and then they don't actually measure whether or not the AI is doing the thing properly. And I think on this, like, it says firing before you measure. That's not referring to like firing a human being. I think there are like two philosophies on this whole thing. If you have a set amount of money, for example, and you set a set amount of runway, I think if there are two identical companies, one decides to like reduce headcount by 30% and use AI, and the other decides to keep the same headcount but use AI, I genuinely think that the team that is like, if you're able to use AI intelligently and you have a larger team that's probably able to do more work and use AI more efficiently, I genuinely think that is the better approach, especially for a large company. Like maybe at a small scale, it's like slightly different, and maybe you can be scrappier. But when I see headlines of like HSBC, laying off 20, 30,000 people because of AI, firstly, I'm skeptical that it really is because of AI. I think it's kind of a convenient narrative. But secondly, I think if you're a HSBC versus a Barclays or someone similar, and one decides to, hey, we're going to keep all our people, or at least keep the headcount, and get people who are really good at using AI, I think they'll, over time, probably wipe the floor with a company that does the opposite of that, which is just purely just reduce headcount and see it only as a cost-saving measure. I think that's short-sighted. So then I guess, last couple of slides is on LaunchLemonade itself. So I haven't really touched on our platform at all, but that's kind of intentional. I wanted to talk you through how we think about things first. So as a platform, we are model agnostic, so you can swap between something like 50 different LLMs under the hood. The truth is you probably won't use 50 LLMs. You'll probably use fewer than 10, I would have thought, but you can swap between those. We do provide governance sort of built in. So there's an audit trail for all of your usage. There's like access prevention. So basically, you can prevent like the shadow AI usage. It does depend on your use case, but you are able to prevent shadow AI usage, because if your team are using a single platform, this could be LaunchLemonade, this could be another thing, or it could be Claude or whatever. But essentially, if you're preventing shadow AI by allowing people to use whatever the company approved thing is, then you can build in governance around that too. Yeah, on the marketplace side of things, basically what we're building is an ability so that people, if you have a workflow, if you have something that you think actually this is good commodity work, and not only is this really useful and it uses some of my domain expertise, I actually want to share this either with my team internally, so you can share tools amongst your teammates. We're also going to build in the future so that if it's like really, really powerful and you want to share it with a wider audience, like the general user base of LaunchLemonade outside of your company, then you could do that too if you wanted to. But yeah, one of the key things there is, like, let's say, for example, I'm working and I have a really good marketing agent and I want to share that with James, who is on my team. We can do that like natively within the platform too. Yeah, and hopefully that gives you then the overview and idea of like how we think about where AI should fit into some of these teams. We've Shen pinged me this morning being like, you want to add this promo code. So basically, we have got a promo code if you want like a month's free access just to try it and see how it goes. Feel free to go to launchlemonade.app. We've recently re-platformed from an old platform to a new, and there is a promo code TFN1 here. I think it's valid till Friday or something like that. But yeah, fingers crossed throughout this. I've hopefully answered some of your questions. We've got 10 minutes as well for any of the questions to pick up as we go.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Joe. I think, I mean, even for myself with the Founder Network, there's so many bits within that where I'm like, we should definitely be looking at that. So yeah, quite an eye opener. I see there's a few questions from the group. So Tom, I'm going to come to you. You had a question around where to actually train and where to actually get a partner to implement some of these things. So Tom, I don't know if you want to give just a bit more detail around your question.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you. That was amazing. But yeah, my question was around, I see obviously Claude have released a lot of training. Obviously, there's training on Gemini, etc. Would you think, so I'm a sauna builder by nature, to give you a bit of background, but in general, I think you've talked about on one of your slides where it's worth building, where it's worth sort of employing, using a thing, and where it's worth using a sort of a company to provide the stack. But would you say for everyone, is it probably worth at least doing the basic training so we've got an awareness of what's going on, or would you say just go to a company and let them handle it?
I'm way more, my personal view is I'm way more of I'm like naturally inquisitive, right? So I'm definitely of the training camp. I think the more you know, the better empowered you are to make a decision that's right for you, and only you can know that. Excuse me, only you can know that. But it depends on what level of training it is that you're interested in. I think that's the challenge, why I really didn't touch too much on training. If the training is like trying to work out what is available and what is doable, I actually think one of the best things to do for that, for like just keeping up with what's going on in the space, is there's a couple of podcasts out there. But what I don't want to do is recommend another podcast to you, right? So because do you really have time in your day for another podcast? So what I do is I actually take my podcast, you can take a podcast link and you can transcribe it to LM Notebook, or you can do this Launch Lemonade too. But basically, it will extract, like, if you have like 5 podcasts that you listen to try to keep up, you can get it to extract all of the information and provide it to you in like a distilled sort of like way, without listening to the ads, without cutting out all the fluff. And also you can get it to say, hey, look, I'm interested in like saunas. So there's like a lot of this is around like people's homes, people's attitudes, health and well-being, and all that sort of stuff, right? And so and then there's all the regs around it, whether or not how to get one installed in your house. Anyway, so you can get it to distill it in a way that's going to be most pertinent to you. And so I tend to do that. So I have podcasts that I enjoy, that I listen to because I like listening to that subject and it brings me happiness. And then I have podcasts that I process because I think it's going to have good information, but I don't ever actually listen to it. I just read the digest afterwards that's been distilled for me. So I think that's one side on training. The second side on training, I'll put a link in the chat. If you really want a really good deep dive on how LLMs work from the person who helped to design ChatGPT 4, and if you have 4 hours to spare, it is an amazing 101 technical introduction to how LLMs work. It's like fantastic. The guy is called Andrei Karpathy, and he's got this 4-hour video. It's like, if you want to understand literally what happens when you send some words, it does something and it sends something back, then It's a great explainer for that. So I can send that to, and that's free as well. So I would say those are the free ways to go about training. And then it depends. I think from then you should be able to decide then, okay, cool. I feel like I'm comfortable enough to go and experiment on my own, or you can go to a provider that can give you something more bespoke that's like, tailored to whatever your requests are. Hopefully I answered the question, Tom.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Perfect. And Joe, if you send us the link to that video, we'll include it in the roundup along with your code and everything else.
Yep.
As I say, we have a few more minutes, so if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. Darcy, I see you had a couple of questions, particularly around how to interact with agents. So I don't know if you want to give just a bit more context around that question.
Hi, James. Yeah, thank you. I did put two questions in, but you covered the first one I asked that was about like security and data and how you control that. My second one is more of like I feel like I can't be the only one in this bucket, but I might well be. How are you interacting with your agents? Every time I use an agent, like I have projects set up in Claude and they have their own skills that they're dedicated to, but I'll copy and paste things from documents and emails or whatever, put it in, ask it to do that thing. Then I'll copy and paste the output or make some edits, download the document, make some edits there, re-upload it, copy and paste that into sometimes another project to do the next bit because it's quite a different task, or then into whatever I'm actually using at the time. And I feel like I'm missing a trick when you talk about it's linked to your calendar and it'll put time in your inbox and stuff. How are you actually, where are you typing in the messages to send it, and where is it displaying the output, if that's not just a painfully naive question?
No, it's not at all. So this is the one I built for myself, right? So this is, but also I also have that same problem of like document handover. Like if I'm working on Excel and I want it to do a thing, I still have to transfer from one to the other. You can make that more seamless, but the problem is you need to give the LLM access to write code on your machine, which I personally, I'm actually just not actually comfortable doing yet. I will in the future. I think in the future they'll work out ways to make it sandbox and super safe. But anyway, so that's part of your question. So you're not the only one who's finding that. But it's probably a good thing that you're not letting it go wild just yet until it's got like it's probably months away, right? I don't think it's that long until this is like relatively safe to do. But yeah, for the first question, the way I thought about it was like I get inputs for my day. So whether that's a calendar event, an email, a random Slack message or whatever, and I want just one place so there's like a chat box that I just dump all of that stuff. Then it grabs it for me, it puts it into my own to-do list, and it puts it into different projects that it thinks it's associated with. And then literally so on one hand side, it's like three sides. There's like the chat in the middle, that's the interface. There's the left-hand side, which is the projects and the to-do list. And then there's the right-hand side, which is the calendar. And it's literally just hooked up to my Google Calendar. So I try to make it so that I can stay in one place for as much of the workflow as possible, because I'm too easily distracted. So essentially that. But I think lots of people will offer similar things like this. I think staying in one place as much as you can is quite helpful, because it has all the context, right? And you don't want to have to just keep reminding it of everything.
Okay, great. That's really helpful and reassuring to know. Quick follow-up question. You said into other projects. Can something like Claude, if it does a task in one project, automatically send it to various other projects and put it in their context windows, or will you still be coming out and putting it into a different one?
I don't know if Claude can do that, but it is 100% possible. The thing you're describing is 100% possible. Yeah, it is totally doable.
Right, I'll build my own.
yeah. It's just whether or not they've designed it so that projects can share context. I don't use the project thing within Claude. I use my own thing, but yeah, it's totally feasible. Like your LLM should be able to see you and all your work, and then the project is just how you're describing that piece of work, right? And there can easily be lots of crossover between all of them. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. And Joe, we are just about out of time, but thank you so much for that session. I think we've got plenty to go away and think about our own businesses and where we can be doing things in a more AI automated way.